Hello, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And our guest for November's book of the month is Dana Cuadrado. Hello, Dana.
Dana is a longtime romance reader and professional professional romance reader. So we're really excited to have her. You and Kelly do seasonally booked up, and also you work with source books, right? So you've got,
I work at Forever.
Forever.
oh gosh, I'm sorry.
And all the same apples.
And she
Similar.
picked this book for us, which was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna. And we loved it so much. So thank you.
I'm so happy that you loved it.
It was, so we started reading it right at the end of October, beginning of November, at least for me. And it was such a perfect, witchy, but also cozy. I
Mhm.
loved it. It was good timing too. Got my
So
blanket.
cozy, so warm, so lovely, like just wonderful.
It feel like that new kind of like cozy fantasy like keyword. I feel like this is the epitome of that. So I'm so
Hmm.
happy that you loved it. You'd given me like it shouldn't be historical. And so I was like, okay. I also wanted to pick a BIPOC author. So I was like, this feels like the best timing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was great.
And you wanted me to have already read it and loved it. So this is all so exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
It was really good. And I think we talked a little bit before, and Marielle and I have talked about in the past, like sometimes just looking at the cover, it's hard to know, is it really a romance? Is it just more like women's fiction? Is it just more like fantasy? Like you sometimes can't tell. And of course we know that you're a professional romance reader and you would never bring us a book that was not a romance. So we were excited to read it and we loved it so much.
I This was definitely one that I read because of recommendations from other people.
Mhm.
And I've listened to the audiobook both times now on the reread, and I highly recommend that format as well. I think the
Okay.
audiobook narrator is fantastic.
That's good to know.
Mhm. I love an audiobook, especially I commute for work.
Mm.
So sometimes it's like a really nice way to deal with, cozy in my car, even
Yeah.
if there's like chaos outside. Um,
Yes.
what made you decide, was it just like it checked all the boxes of things that you wanted, or is that a book that you've been wanting to recommend or that you've been wanting more people to know about?
It felt like a really good timing for like the fall autumnal season.
Hmm.
And then I think when I look back on like I wanted something that was fresh in my mind, of like a book that I have recently loved. Not I didn't want to, pick like a really kind of like random throwback. So I don't know if it felt random of a pick, but
Yeah.
I looked back at like my favorite books of the year, and this one was an early read, but like it stands out as really memorable.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
wonderful. Um, so do you enjoy like an opposites attract story in general? And is it, I guess it's opposites attract big and then grumpy sunshine small, I guess, in this situation. But either way, those are, co-tropes, I guess I would call them. Um,
Yeah.
is that a big thing for you? Do you like that typically?
Oh my goodness. I love a grumpy sunshine in particular. And opposites attract as well. I think it adds just the right amount of like conflict. I think a good romance novel needs conflict that is both exterior and interior. And I think like opposites attract can really lend itself to like me rooting for them. Also, I'm like kind of love when like I'm like a love interest is like mean to the other person, but like not in like a don't be like dick to me, but like just be like a little bit mean. Like I just want a little like a Roy Kent,
Not an
Yeah.
like
alpha hole, like not an
just be
old
like a bit
school
gruff, and then I
lament.
will worm my way into your heart, you know?
Mhm.
I will say that for me, even I guess broader than like opposites attract, I love um protagonists who challenge each other. So like if you can make it so one of them sees things totally different than the other one, or that like they like poke at things even if it's accidentally, like I'm all about it. And I thought in this case, we had people who were very like good people, but they poked at it, with like the things that they just they represented things that were like challenging one to the other. So they really, I felt like there was like an inherent challenge, just from like sticking them in the same place.
I feel like the story really begins where Jamie does not trust Mika, but I feel like it doesn't take him too long to like realize. I'm so sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
To realize that like she's inherently a good person, and he's just so overprotective of those girls that I feel like you as the reader see like through that like rough exterior for him and see the like warm cinnamon heart in his soul. The icing is right there.
Definitely. And I think you kind of watch her journey to figuring that out too. And it kind of leans into the conversation that she has about nice versus kind, and how Jamie is not very nice, but he is kind. And same thing with Primrose, who like was her guardian growing up. And it's interesting how easy it is for her to like parse that out when she's involved with somebody in any way.
And then you like learn throughout the book that like really she comes across as so trusting of other people, but she has a lot of reasons to not trust anyone, and she's been used so many times by people. And so I think I really love not just like the story with like Jamie and Primrose, but also Terracotta and her opening up, and like obviously she's mirroring Jamie throughout like growing up, but I think seeing her walls come down, I think, are just as beautiful.
Yeah, that was sweet. I did think it was interesting how layered all the characters were. Like Jamie is very outwardly like, oh, I don't know, maybe I just stay away from people. And Mika isn't. Like you think Mika's kind of almost like the exact opposite, but she is not really. Like she doesn't really let herself get close to people. Like no, I mean she is nice to people, but she doesn't let people like take her in. I like that feels super dangerous to her from like as soon as she starts liking all the people at Nowhere House, she immediately starts to like, it's like danger flashing.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting.
The dog walker, I think from the beginning of the book is like a really good example of like he wanted to be a great friend to her, and she understands that like she's just been taught and educated that like she can't make attachments to people, and it's so sad.
It is. It's sad when he's like talking to the dog as like I'll miss you, because it's like not, it's like they don't have the kind of relationship where they can speak to each other that way.
Yeah.
And I thought about that, like just she moves so much, and to move away and just be kind of like, okay, well, bye. Never see you again. Like this is the modern world. It's not like they couldn't have kept in touch. Right. She was just like, nice knowing you.
I think that's how she manages it, because I don't think it's natural for her to keep people out. I think the way she does it is by not letting them in for very long so that it's okay for her to leave. Because if she stayed somewhere, she would have totally been that guy's friend, or maybe even ended up dating him. Like, who knows? Like, and she can't let that happen. So she just has to leave, because that's the only way that she can like keep people out.
Like I feel like the reason she made those videos, right? She wanted community and connection, and she was never able to get that. Like she's the one who wanted the Irregular Society of Witches to meet more often. Like she's that young witch who, wanted more and couldn't handle it.
Yeah. Also, I guess even within within Nowhere House, like their little community, they were very close with each other, but also very insular. So you had really like seemed very like opposite, in that Mika like probably knew more people, but she didn't like know any of those people. I don't know if I'm making sense, but like her connections like she might have had more connections, but they were not as deep. And then she gets into this place where people don't have very many connections, but all the connections are really deep and have lots of history. And there are several times in the book where there's conversations happening and she just feels like, oh, I'm not really
Part
in
of
on
this.
this.
Yeah.
Which is sad, but also just highlighted how much she wanted that. And she didn't think she could have it, which made me sad.
Yeah. And I think that that sort of was highlighted even more when her and Jamie were getting to know each other more. And every time he got upset that she didn't expect to be included or didn't, think
Assumed that she
well of
wouldn't be.
herself, that it like pissed him off. Like he was like the first example I can think of is when she wanted to take Rosetta to the bookshop and he was like totally against it. And then Ian, I think, says, "Oh, we should have just waited a week and you would have had your own vote." And she was like, "I get a vote?" And he's like so mad that she like can't even imagine that she could have a say, that he like gives in and says, "Okay, you can go to the bookshop." Like it's so sweet.
Yeah, I love like her learning to like operate in a family. It's so like this is like the epitome of like a found family book. Like that and it's so, I think because the characters are all so layered, it works even better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the more we get to know each of the characters, the more we see that too. Because even with Primrose, she could have been like very flat and very like just villain.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, it was like, oh no, she also like her experiences, her trauma, and her life taught her certain things. Like the way she internalized her experiences meant that she was like, oh, these are the rules I have to live by. Um, and she was too scared to ever like challenge that or go outside of those bounds. Which then made her like super strict and come off like like a completely different way from the outside. So Mika's experience of Primrose as a child um, affected her in ways that Primrose probably wasn't even intending, and that like when you see conversations with them as adults, Primrose is kind of like, I don't understand why you can't tell me things, or I don't understand why. And it's like,
Or why you
well,
never go back to that house or any other number of things. Yeah.
yeah, it's just really sweet to be able to have like see a relationship like that on the page that actually like follows through. Like we get to see the whole evolution of like of Mika learn, like because she learns how to be in a family, then she's able to look at her own past and like people who have been in her life and maybe like give them like use those lessons from Nowhere House crew to be able to like have an in with Primrose and maybe have a different relationship with her than what she'd had in the past. I thought it was really smart the way that all of those things wove together.
I also think it like touches on this like really interesting like concept of like intergenerational like trauma with women, where it's like you pass on like the things that like, and man, this also happens, and you can only speak for, but like you pass on your own things to your kid, and then that your kid will pass it to them, and like hopefully the cycle breaks, but like a lot of times it doesn't. And I think this is like the women not having kids because of the issues with the witches is like, I think it speaks to another greater theme there. And
Yeah. Well, and everybody is like in this book, everybody is for the most part doing their best. Even if their best isn't great. They're all like they're trying. They just have a bunch of stuff.
Well, and I feel like it's interesting the way that she laid out the witches, because basically every witch has trauma because every single witch's parents die when they're young. And
And it's because they were born like, oh my
yeah.
goodness.
And just based on Mika's information that she has, nobody really understands why it happened. Like she didn't have that conversation fully with her until the book, which means it had been years and years of vague responses or like no responses, like, oh, kids don't talk about that, whatever. And so it's like, not only did the trauma happen, but they don't really understand anything except for that. Maybe it's because of them. And then they're bounced around. Some probably got lucky and had other family members raise them. Some, like Mika, had no one, and Primrose stepped in and helped her. But it was interesting to me how that was laid out. Like every single witch is like traumatized from the time they're a kid, and they don't really understand much about it, and like all the fallout from that in different ways.
And then to see these three young girls having the thing that she always longed for, that she was always told could not be possible. Mm-hmm. And then to kind of have like this inner envy of like, they get to be together. It's a sweet but sad.
Yeah, and not only do they get to be together, but they have adults that live with them that actually care about them and aren't trying to use them or abuse them. And yeah, it was literally everything she wanted right in front of her. I imagine that was pretty scary going into that at first.
Right, because when I started this book, I had no clue. Like, I like knew going into it that it was a romance, but when I first started it, I kind of thought that like Ian and them were maybe gonna have like nefarious plans here. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know, I kind of just doubted. Mm-hmm. But then like you read it and you're like, no, they just love these little girls. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the twist, like I thought for it also including Jamie's POV, mm-hmm. Sangu did a really good job of keeping that twist real hush. Like yeah. I thought I knew what was going on, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh.
Well, it's like all you really know is that he's still hiding something, but you don't know. At least I had no idea like what it was gonna be, or like why. Even mm-hmm. once it came out what it was, like the reason why surprised me too. So yeah, it was I was definitely shocked by all those twists. I don't know if you were as well, Dana.
Oh yeah. And I feel like too, because you're like lulled into this, like this is a cute little story. And then like all these twists start coming out. And I was like, I wasn't even like thinking about twists. Like I didn't know where that this was going anywhere. But then it's just like everything starts to connect and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was so good.
Yeah, and she did also do this thing that I really find fascinating when authors do, where it's like she as the author, like she told us like what's the worst thing that could happen, and also like if this then that, and she let it all fall apart, and I it was really impressive to me, I guess, that she didn't mind doing that. Like she didn't mind doing the thing that was gonna hurt her characters the most. She didn't mind like, and they just had to figure out how to deal with it after the fact. I thought that all of the people in the story were pretty like mature and dealt with things in a mature way. I think in one of the recaps, Megan and I talked about like an argument that happened in the car where Jamie says something really like below the belt to Mika, and she's just like, okay, like he immediately is like, I shouldn't have said that, and she is like, well, you told me to stop and I didn't stop, so I like they, even though they're both like hurt, mm-hmm. they deal with it in a way that's very like grown up and think about things in a way that's very grown up, and I really appreciated that too. I think sometimes when people are trying not to like be problematic or not to have their characters be problematic, they also kind of like shy away from letting them fully make a mistake. And in this case, I mean, the emotional stakes were high. It wasn't like end the world sort of stuff that was happening, but they did the thing, like they did the worst thing they could do to the other one. And we just had to see how they were going to figure it out and how they were going to fix it. seems like very real world problems for a book that's all about like magic.
I did really like that aspect, like how it was clearly a magical world, but other than, the girls needing tutoring in their witchery, like there was really every problem they had was like a real world problem that anybody could have pretty much. So it really gave some like weight to the things that were going on when you think about like what would I do in that situation, like other than the magic, everything else was very real.
I like that there's that other conflict of the house. Like I think it helped like continue this story on. And I think sometimes like these like subtle fantasy kind of paranormal things, sometimes they don't have enough things driving them forward other than this like magical element. And I think that really helped make it fast paced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have read a few books, not like maybe in the last year and a half. We've read some kind of um low, like down home, kind of lower stakes, small, like books that felt sometimes like slow in the reading. And Megan and I had a conversation about this because she is not a fan of like slow burn, really. And when books are, like they're taking too long to get stuff done, she's like, okay, what's happening? And I think in romance, I am too. I read widely. And so depending on what I'm reading, sometimes I'm like, well, it's okay for this particular kind of book. But this book was so cozy and sweet and really romantic, even though like the romance didn't like fully develop until way later and like probably the last third of the book. Um, but it didn't feel slow. Like no matter, you were still like, oh, what's going on? And even like it had kids, it broke lots of rules for people, I think, but it didn't, all of the things that were there like added, they didn't take away from the story for me.
Definitely. I think that for me, a slow burn has to really pack a lot of tension, not just sexual tension either, but like just tension between their personalities, between their characterizations. Because if they're not constantly fighting against wanting to kiss, then like why do I believe that they would ever kiss? You know what I mean? Like if it's going to take that long, like they have to constantly be fighting against that. If they're not, then it just doesn't work for me. Then I'm like, just move on. You know what I mean? Like if it's going to take that long and you're not constantly wishing you were kissing the other person, then like, what are you even doing?
Megan's like, you don't have any chemistry.
No.
Next.
And I feel like it was so clear how attracted they were to each other the whole time. And there was just all these other reasons why, she didn't feel like she could get involved and vice versa. And so, like you said, it didn't feel slow because that was always there, like simmering in the background.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Dan. I will say that the first hints for me of true love was when Mika like made all the dog hairs disappear. As a person who has a dog, I was like, oh,
Swoon.
And he was so surprised that she even noticed that he didn't love that there was dog hair on everything.
It was so sweet.
That was so sweet
thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many little like romantic moments too of like when she's not there and he's like, oh, but I can't wait to see her again. I'm like, oh, and then when he picks up on like her naming conventions for everything, he was like, oh, so that's all witches, and I was like, oh, you're seeing her. Like I think there's so many moments of him seeing her that makes me go, oh, I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because we talked about all the ways that she kept herself apart from people. And it's like she didn't want to be perceived really, because then she would have to in turn like perceive other people, which would lead to her getting attached to them, which she couldn't do. And so all the ways that she's avoided that over the years, you know, just don't work with him, and he sees her the whole time, and it's so great.
Yeah.
Oh.
Also, like, even when she, like, I don't know, there's something really great about a, a man in particular who will take care of you, who like anticipate the need and take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, that was great. There were a couple instances, probably the biggest one for me was when he um when she was going to meet Primrose and she had been sick, she was still recovering, and she's like, no, it's fine, I can do it. But then they drove all that way, like 4 hours or something one way, just to make sure they left before she left so that they could be there in time so that when she needed a ride, if she couldn't drive home, that they would be there. And like,
Oh, it
that's
was so
pretty
swoony.
special.
I loved
Yeah.
it. And she was so surprised by it too, which just made it better somehow. Like she never
I
expected
mean,
anybody in her life to do stuff like that for
but
her.
also she kept trying to think of like reasons why they would have done this for her. And I think she did that a few times during the book, but in this time I was like, girl, they like you. You are their friend. But she kept like, oh, it's because you like needed me to be back to teach. You know, like she was in her head like, no, there's got to be a logical reason why they would do this. It wasn't just because they wanted to help me. And it's like, no, they just wanted to help you.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. So, and then I think we should also, of course, talk about in the epilogue, which I love, you know, I love an epilogue. And this was such a really great one because, you know, all the witches are together, all their family members and friends, everybody who knows about them, all gathered together. And of course, Jamie is like hiding out because he's not a peopler. and and when she goes to talk to him, and he says he thinks Primrose always like stares him down like a bug, like she's not sure how he feels about Mika. And Mika's like, well, how do you feel about me? And he's like, you know. And she's like, hello, like you're a book person, like you understand that swoony words must be said, like this needs to happen. And that whole conversation was just so like romantic and sweet and fun, and it was like their whole dynamic like condensed down into like one conversation, and I loved
Yes.
it so much.
Also, he did choose my favorite Austin Sunni words to say. So I was very satisfied.
Oh my god, it was so good.
I love an epilogue. And I love this
I
epilogue.
I loved it so much. Thank you again for picking it because it was really a great pick for us. We had a great time reading it.
Yeah. And we were talking before we started um about how romantic this book was,
Mm-hmm.
and just talking about like romance in general and how um I was saying that maybe it's like the rise of the book talk, you know, like generation where there's lots of like talk of like spice being like almost like that is what equals romance. But for me it's really separate, and I really liked how romantic this book was. um Even if the like chili pepper rating isn't as high, or it didn't start until later, it was still like
Yeah.
throughout such a swoony book. um and I really love that in a romance. Like I want to feel that these characters are like really there for each other and like helping each other grow, and that like I could just see them, like I see how they fit together and how they need to be together forever. And I really like had that in this book. It was great.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's like it's those little moments that can go even further than like a crazy wild sex scene. It's like
Hmm.
sure it's fun to read and it's like get you excited. But I think there's like something about like him looking at her and like you as the reader know this feeling that is going on even when they don't know it, or it's like he does something sweet for her and she's just like doesn't anticipate it. Like those like are the things that are going to get me like kicking my feet and squealing and giggling and very excited about like continuing my reading. um and I want like I kind of like I love that like more people have come to the genre, but I think like we're really losing that like lack of enjoyment of everything the genre offers. And I that's a little like I have a lot of like rants in me about like newer readers not exploring and not finding like historical or like the history and like small town romance I think does this really well. But man, I can go on. Don't get me up on my Apple box, okay?
Well, and I will
I
say
love
in
that
this
book.
particular book, Mika, sex for her has always been basically meaningless because she's never allowed herself to really be close to anybody. So it was almost like she needed the opposite of that from him to get to the point where she actually cared about him, because she's never allowed herself to get that far before. And having sex with a random person that she's never going to see again has been like her MO this whole time, because she can't like allow herself to do anything beyond that. And every time she has, like with the guy that they mentioned from college, it's like her nannies all over again. They like use her and use her magic, and it's a mess. And so I think the slow burn of this, not only because of the secrets that they were keeping from each other, but because of her history and how she relates to people, um especially the opposite sex, like she needed that time to really like fall for him. Yeah, I don't know, it was so great.
Yeah,
Oh,
I thought so too. It
God, I
needed
loved it so much. So
we
thank you. Truly, thank you.
I I I don't know if Sangu's like second book has come out, but
no, I did.
I'm very
It's not
excited
coming till
for it.
like April, I
April,
think.
I think I read. Yeah.
I need to
Mm-hmm.
make sure I get it pre-ordered because I think that they're a talent and I am really excited to see what comes next.
Yeah. It's I think the cover reveal was on Instagram, and it's
Mhm.
similar looking cover, but yeah, very exciting. And it takes place in like an inn, which sounds really fun. I love that kind of thing. So
Only one room, only one bed.
yeah. So many tropes can be had at an inn. And not to mention the whole like forced proximity of it all, which is always fun for me too.
Mhm. Like, can we get somebody snowed in? I mean, I'm sure she is writing her own book, but as soon as I see it, I'm like, oh,
Yes, I do love a forced proximity moment. Um, I especially love it because that's sort of that aspect was in this book too, because
They're
like technically
living
she
in
didn't
the
have
same
to be
house.
there, but she had agreed to be there, and she was going to be there for the time, and they were
well,
getting,
they couldn't really leave the safety of the house for very long, at least not all of them, and not, so they were a little bit stuck.
yeah.
Um, do you have any other boxes that you would like to stand on rant for us? I love,
Yeah,
I,
I'll save my controversial thoughts.
We can talk after.
yeah, but I,
But I truly love this book and it's really special and I hope that more people, pick it up and give it a chance because I think it is everything and more.
yeah, it is. It was
Totally agree.
um on my list, but like it would have taken me probably a minute to get to it. And I'm so glad that he moved it all the way to the top because I mean, it was really good timing, like mood
Seasonally.
wise and season wise to read it. But also like it was such a like balm to the soul kind of book. Like it was really nice to read. Made me so happy. Um and yeah, there's so many little moments that added up to like a really great reading experience. And I'd like to see a found family in romance. I like to see like books that show love like in all different like iterations of it. And I thought this book did such a good job of that, of giving us um all different kinds of relationships and like how they enhance, your life. So it was so good.
So like quirkily British. Like I love that aspect
Yeah.
of it too. Like it just you could feel it. It's Britishness.
Yeah, for
That's very
sure.
true. That's true too. Even like distances that
Mhm.
they're like, oh, we gotta go to, and it's this many hours, and I'm like, oh, that's not an American like long distance.
No, that's
So,
like driving through Georgia. So yeah, it was funny though. I think the speed spell is honestly the coolest thing about that. Like, what
if
a cool
only.
thing to be able to do.
And my favorite is the koi pond.
Oh
And
yeah.
she just like has like a floating pond and
Just like
it's there.
in the boot of her car.
And it
Amazing.
had been in her apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So fun. Yeah, and it's funny because obviously, you know, our page is about romance and we like to talk about the romance, but all the magical stuff in this book was really fun and interesting little things. Like I loved all of her like potions and like the one that dried them off after they got wet when they were kissing in the woods. Like that's amazing. Like what a cool thing to be able to do. And yeah, I felt like that quite a few times in this book. She would give a potion for something and I'd be like, oh, that's amazing. What a cool thing. So
I
yeah,
I
love
love
that
that.
part
like
was really fun
Ian
too.
being so amazed about everything, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm making tea," and he's like, "Magical tea," and she's like, "No, it's tea."
Tea. Though it does seem like most of her teas are like sort of magical anyway, like just the way that she puts them together. And talk about another swoony moment when she gives everybody their Christmas or their solstice gifts, and she's like made these cute little labels for everybody's tea mixes, and the one for Jamie is like so swoony, and she like that she talks about like the look that he gives her, and you can just like picture it. It's amazing.
This would be such a good movie.
It would.
Mhm.
It really would.
Definitely. I
Okay.
would love to see
Sorry.
the
I'm
girls
like
do their
immediately
best
casting in
themselves.
my brain.
Yeah.
Or it could even be like an animated thing. Like I feel like it just has so much potential.
I agree.
Yeah. What do we think about Ian and oh shoot, I'm gonna forget his name. But like their
Oh,
relationship.
what's his name? Ken.
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 Ken, I think. Yeah.
I thought it
Like
was cute.
Talk about opposites attract again. Like that's
Like I love every time Ken just like humors him.
yeah.
He just like
mhm.
he loves him so much, and he's just like let him perform.
A couple times and he's like, okay, that's enough of that.
Yeah. Yeah, he only rarely steps in and is like, you know what? That's not a good idea. Like,
Mhm. But also when he like distracted him from his harebrained like idea by telling him that he was running out of like pink felt or flamingo pink felt
oh
or
yeah.
whatever, and he had to like, oh no, must shop.
Oh gosh. Yeah, they were really cute and funny. Um
Hmm.
and yeah, again, very opposites attract, very uh and that's like and you
When
again, you
like
saw the
old
ways that
people in
he
love.
yeah. You saw the ways that he like cared for Anne, like because of his, you know, big personality and it's like he might be the type of person who doesn't always express like what he needs, but like Kent, his husband, obviously knows what he needs and like takes care of it, which is always lovely. So yeah, that was really it's so good. All the characters are great. The house, like everything about it was amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, and we've been really careful to not tell you about that twist
Yeah.
at the end, but you really should read them. It's
Yeah.
very rare, I
Or go
think
look
that,
listen to our recaps if you don't care about being spoiled.
but I would, yeah, I'll say that probably us three read enough that it's probably I would imagine that it's kind of hard to sneak up on us with something. And there were
Mhm.
a couple of twists there that I was like, oh,
Mm,
was not expecting.
yeah. I think we talked about maybe in our last recap, like we saw like a little bit of the stuff with Lillian, but like the rest of it was like a big shock.
And
So
even what I thought with Lillian was
it was not what you
not
thought. Yeah.
enough. What I
Mhm.
thought was not enough.
Yeah.
It was
Not
much,
enough to
much
be like,
worse.
oh, I saw that. Yeah, no. Not at all. Oh my gosh. Well, Dana, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. We loved having you on. We love this book. And
Recommend books to us anytime.
yes, absolutely.
Also, where can the people find you?
Yes.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so happy that you both enjoyed it. People can find me on Instagram at To All the Nerdy Girls. And I feel like that's really the most places that I'm active. Twitter, X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anybody is interested in, a seasonal book club, you can message her on Instagram and you can get added to the Discord and read
There's
along.
some really robust discussions going on in that Discord. Very fun. And you are really good about picking, I think, interesting either like authors or like just like the top, like a trope to talk about for each season, which is it's a fun way to read, I think, to have like, oh, here's books that have like kind of a thematic through line.
Mm-hmm.
But also lots of people thinking deep thoughts about
Very
their
deep
reading, which is
thoughts.
nice.
Get very into the nitty gritty all the time.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's just a DM, right? Like we just find Dana on Instagram at To All the Nerdy Girls and then send a DM.
Yep.
Yes. So thank you again, everybody. We hope you loved this book. If you haven't read it yet, you really should.
Yes,
And
read
we
it
will
now.
see you in December.
Bye.